It is important what we are doing, but much more important is the way how we are doing it, isn't it? Every person, as well as cultures, have their own point of view. Morality and ethics are depend on everyone's identity, which is dictating the motivation and therefore the means we take to fulfill our goals. But don't we compromise our humanity for personal gains? And for what? Power, wealth, knowledge? Aren't we like Dr. Faust in Goethe's masterpiece? Share, like and subscribe, for this video can reach everyone else. The concept that the end justifies the means has been debated since ancient times. In the 5th century BC, Sophocles argued in his play Electra that the end excuses any evil. The Roman philosopher Cicero stated that in critical moments where the safety of the home and homeland are on the line, one may disregard moral rules to protect them. In the 16th century, Italian political philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli notoriously advocated that rulers should learn when not to be bound by ordinary ethical standards, but use deceit and force if it achieves the political aims. In the 19th century, German philosopher Hegel said, "The end must directly justify the means." More recently, Marxist Leon Trotsky reportedly used the phrase, "The end may justify the means as long as there is something that justifies the end." He saw morality as defined by class interests. So for thousands of years, philosophers have asked if a desired aim or goal is important enough to accept more questionable methods of getting there. Consequentialist schools believe maybe, while deontologists disagree. Views go back and forth, but the basic tension around moral trade-offs remain unresolved. The dilemma of whether the end justify the means lies at the heart of ethical debates surrounding consequentialism versus deontology. There is a moral detailed explanation. Consequentialism is the view in philosophy that the morality of an action should be judged based on the consequences it brings about. From this lens, the ends or outcomes can provide justification for the means taken to get there. So long as the goal is seen as ethical, desirable, it can potentially excuse bad methods. For example, a consequentialist might argue that lying or stealing could be warranted if it achieves something sufficiently valuable like saving lives. The maximization of the greater good is the key of ethical imperative. However, the ontological school of thought disagree. They argue that morality should be judged by duty and adherence to ethical rules or principles, regardless of calculus and positive versus negative results. Certain means, like deceit or violence, are inherently wrong. The ends do not justify those means. Deontologists say judging actions by consequences alone is dangerous or irrational. It risks justifying apparent acts, and the metrics of costs and benefits cannot always be calculated. Rights and duties should guide moral reasoning. So in summary, consequentialists believe the end can warrant the means if ethical goods are maximized. Deontologists counter that the means themselves matter morally beyond just ends-focused reasoning. This long-running dispute underlies much debate about when pragmatism versus moral absolutes are more important. The real-world applicability of ends justify means also depends heavily on context, but the philosophical tension remains core to ethics. The tension between ends justify the means versus adhering to ethical principles shows up frequently in modern political dilemmas. For example, in wartime tactics, politicians may argue things like drone strikes, torture or mass surveillance are necessary to defend national security, even if civilian lives are risked. Others counter such means violate ethics and rule of law. In election campaigns, candidates could partake in mudslinging, disinformation, foreign interference if it helps them to win, believing the ends of public office justified it. Critics argue fair democratic norms must be respected regardless. In policy trade-offs, government programs like welfare or pandemic restrictions promise public health ends, yet they require tax dollars, limitations on freedoms, privacy impacts as means, fueling debates. In revolution ideology, revolutions may use violence and unrest, thinking it gets liberation from oppression. But disorder may undermine the ideals and breed instability in practice. The dilemma of whether the end justify the means arises as a crucial problem in many areas beyond just politics and philosophy. It matters in business and finance, in science and medicine, in criminal justice, in police and prosecution, in technology, in war and espionage, in environmentalism, or just in personal relationships. In all these situations and more, real-world outcomes provide alluring justifications, but deontological concerns over proper ethical procedures push back and carry weight too. It sparks disputes even within parties or administrations over appropriate balances. There are also arguments around who gets to decide which ends are justified when judging these trade-offs: experts and politicians or broader consensus. Overall, there are probably good cases to be made from multiple angles. Working through this fundamental ethical tension usually requires transparency, accountability checks, public discourse, and compromise. But if the trust and truthfulness is gone, is there any base for thriving peacefully together? So arguments play out across private realms like business, academia, innovation, law enforcement, and public spaces like policy, social issues, diplomacy. The balance is complex with many unknowns, but the underlying tension, do promising ends excuse questionable means or must principles constrain, drives crucial debate across domains. So what do you think? Do entrusted authorities like governments, corporations, and law enforcement agencies deserve some immunity from ethical rules if they believe it serves public interests? What about transparency and accountability? Is taking away civil liberties and rights justified if it reduces crime and increases safety? In dating and relationships, are little white lies useful so one can present an idealized image of oneself early on? Is authentic honesty more important? Should policy decisions like pandemic restrictions or economic stimulus plans be based mostly on expert predictions of outcomes, efficiency, rather than principles of rights and fairness? I'm sure that this topic is important for everyone. What do you think? Type your opinion in the comments. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay thoughtful, stay engaged, stay compassionate. Take care, and as always, let wisdom guide your path.